all about data modeling. We will be recording today's presentation, and all of the materials will be available after our meeting. We are going to encourage you to use the chat function throughout today's call, so please feel free to introduce yourself, say where you're from, and test out that chat functionality. Swag will be given away to those who use it. And with that, I'm Olivia Butler. I'm one of the leaders on the Madison Tableau user group, and I'm the data management liaison for the state of Wisconsin Department of Health Services. I'm leading today's meeting with my co-host, Brad. Brad, do you want to introduce yourself to the group?
Yeah, thanks, Olivia. I'm Brad Darwin. I'm a analytics consultant with CUNA Mutual Group, working with sales reporting, and I'll be co-hosting with Olivia today.
We're so excited to have you all here, and we're going to start ourselves off with a fun Kahoot poll. So get your phones out and ready to participate on that, or you can participate in your desktop browser as well. And then we are very lucky today to be joined by Kirk and Jeff, who are going to do a panel on data modeling and joins and relationships, and teach you all you need to know to transform the data, transform your data and make your analyses so much more efficient. And then we'll be doing a wrap up and giveaways at the end of the meeting. So with that, welcome everybody. And Brad, do you want to talk a little bit about our giveaways today?
Sure. So we have book giveaways, ebook giveaways, and some other, I think it was Tableau store, giveaways that we'll be raffling off. So again, that participation is encouraged. Jen will be monitoring the chat, and we'll be doing that later in the presentation.
Awesome. So let's Kahoot. The pin is on the screen. You'll want to go to kahoot.it, and then it's going to ask for the game pin, which is here. It's 4764110. You can enter your name or a nickname, and then we'll give people just a minute to jump over to Kahoot and join the chat, and then I'll switch my screen and we'll start the game. So again, it's Kahoot, KHOOT.it, and the pin is 4764110. We will go over here. I see a bunch of people are joining already. Thank you, everyone. We'll give it just a minute more so everybody can get switched over. You can also use the QR code here on the screen. And again, kahoot.it, and enter your game pin and your name. All right, we're going to give you just a couple more seconds. So if you're still working on getting that Kahoot URL entered and the pin in, go for it, and then we'll get our game started. All right. Brad, do you think we're good to go?
I think so, yeah.
All right, we're starting the game. Here we go, guys. Five seconds left. Make sure to submit the color on your application that matches what you think the answer is. Ah, awesome. Most of us know he hides in Santa's sack. So our next question here. And for those of you joining us partway through, congrats, Brian W., taking the early lead. For those of you joining, there is ability to join the Kahoot poll at the bottom of the screen here if you would like to join in. I'm actually going to make the screen smaller again because Zoom is blocking the answer, and we mostly knew eggnog comes from England.
Nice.
Well done, everybody. I did not know that. That was news to me. Oh, Paula, moving into the lead. Well done. Oh, nice. Very well done. It.
Awesome.
You guys are killing it. Okay. Oh, Paula, it's the one to beat. Here we go. I'm so proud of my gift game. Not gonna lie. I'm very happy with this. Thank you. Thank you. All right, Paris was the correct answer.
Very nice.
And we have a new leader.
Ooh.
Well done, Jenna.
Shuffled the top list.
All right, now we're moving into some more serious questions just for fun. There were no correct answers here, but it's interesting to see we're very evenly distributed. I love that.
Good mix. Yeah.
I know.
Based on the previous question, this one could be tricky.
Mm-hmm. Oh, nicely done. 2008 is the correct answer. All right, Jeff has moved into the lead.
Waterfall ramen is the best, I have to say.
Right? Best kind of noodles. 2020.2 was the correct answer.
Wow. Good job.
Yeah. Oh, Carly is on fire. 4 correct answers in a row. Well done, Carly. All right, true or false? Oh, very good. You all are rocking it today. Oh, Jenna has moved back into the lead and Wendy has moved up 6 places. Well done, Wendy. Nice. All right. Oh, Robert stepping up into the lead. Well done, Robert. Got a couple questions left here. This one is a multiple select.
Gifts keep getting stronger, I have to say, Olivia.
Yes, thank you. I was so proud of myself. Oh, well done.
Good job.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, answer streak 3 for Robert at the top. These two were my favorite gifts. I gotta be honest. All right. Everybody is a winner on this question. All right. The last question. Crystal has moved into the lead and Praveen is the highest climber. Let's wrap it up strong, everybody. Remember, the winner is going to be entered into swag. Well done. All right, let's look at the final podium. Paula in 3rd place. Then we have Crystal, well done. And our #1 winner for Kahoot is, drumroll please. Well done, Carly. Excellent. And Wendy and John as our runners up. Very nicely done. All right, team. Well done. Brad, would you like to ask for some speakers?
Sure. So like, are we doing Jeff and?
No, if we just got generally, we need speakers
Oh,
for our meetings.
Perfect. Upcoming participation in our tug events, encouraged and welcome. Please reach out to any of us on the leadership team. There'll be a slide here towards the end that has all of our names on it. If you're not already active in our Slack group, also feel free to ask in the chat how you can get invited into there. That's another great way to reach out to us, but we're always looking for more speakers and would love to have you.
Thanks, Brad.
Yep.
All right. It's time for the much awaited panel presentation. We are here today to talk about data modeling, how Tableau can make it easier. Our panel experts, Kirk and Jeff, are going to dive into combining data sets to create your visualizations more efficiently. And we want to welcome them both to our Madison Tableau user group today. Jeff Kritzman is a senior analytics consultant at Keyris USA. I always get it wrong. I'm so sorry, Jeff. You'll have to correct me. He started his analytics journey with the University of Iowa Healthcare, first in quality and safety, and then in business intelligence. Prior to that, he worked as a quality improvement coach at Iowa and as a problem solver and technical support at Epic. He earned his Master's of Science in Industrial and Operations in Engineering from the University of Michigan. Welcome, Jeff. We're so grateful to have you here today. And our second panelist is Kirk Monroe. He is a business analytics and performance management expert. He has held leadership roles in product management, marketing, sales enablement, and customer success in analytics software companies, including Cognos, IBM, Kinaxis, Tableau, and Salesforce. Kirk has a passion for coaching and mentoring people to make better decisions through storytelling with data, and is currently one of the 2 owner principal consultants at Paint with Data, a visual analytics consulting firm. He lives in Halifax, Nova Scotia, Canada, and we're very grateful to have him here today as well. With that, I'm going to turn it over to my co-host Brad and to Jeff and Kirk to talk to you about everything you need to know about data modeling.
Sounds good. Thanks, Olivia. So just to give some context for the group, how this will go is I've got some questions here already made up that I'm going to ask our panelists, Kirk and Jeff. as they're going through their answers, and they may even demo some things for us, feel free to drop questions into the chat. If there's more info you'd like, or another question you have, yeah, feel free to drop it in the chat. All that participation is awesome. It gets you entered to win that swag. So, with that, first question, how would we do relationships and joins in the same data model?
Do you want to take a crack at this first, Jeff, or do you want to go?
Sure. Yeah, I think, yeah, go for it.
I think we can build up to a demo on this as well. And first, thanks everyone for attending and for the opportunity to speak here today. So it's interesting, like the question said in the Kahoot, there's a lot of great things about relationships in Tableau, again, that now have been in now for a little over 2 years. One of which is that you can just pull your tables together, create a relationship between them, and then Tableau will figure out things dynamically based on what you bring into the viz, like should I make a left join, a right join, inner join, and then more importantly, or not more importantly, equally importantly, is your data can be at different levels of aggregation, like the question. In the past in Tableau, it was kind of frustrating because you had to always denormalize your data. So you had to take your data, put it at the same level of aggregation, and bring it into a single table. So, I mean, specifically for a while, you could keep in 2 different tables, but Tableau effectively treat it like one table. The only way you could do that different level of aggregation was through a blend. And if anyone's played with blends, they definitely have their challenges. But they served a purpose for sure, less so now. The second part of the question is, but sometimes I think since relationships have come out, a lot of people always go to relationships, but there are lots of good cases for joins as well. Like where if you want to make your filter happen at the level of, at the join, so you're not applying data source filters all the time. A join does that really well, and you can't do that in a relationship really. And so as a result of that, sometimes it makes sense if your data is at the same level of a granularity, doesn't have a lot of extra columns in it, that you might want to actually denormalize it. So it's really cool, and I will show this in a demo in a few minutes, is that you can definitely effectively create a new table, which is a table of tables, a join, and you can create a relationship between that and other tables, and then have Tableau create your new join table like a single table. And I'll just wrap that up by saying it's kind of incredibly powerful as a business analyst that you might not even know, you might not have a clue how to write SQL. And even if you do know how to write SQL, your data engineering team and your DBAs might not let you do that, right? So this is a really cool way to do some pretty advanced data modeling without writing a single line of SQL and without having any control over the database at all.
Yep, and I definitely agree with all of that. And just to kind of add my own perspective, I think, yeah, relationships, huge game changer when it came out. And I think definitely, if you don't, hopefully we'll answer some of the questions you may have about that today, but definitely worth digging into a lot deeper. But yeah, within each logical chunk in the relationship, it's still really important to get your data exactly where you want it. If you're having tables in your data warehouse that you need lookup tables and whatever, you shouldn't be using a relationship for that, because that's something you're always going to want. And so using the joins and the relationships together, like Kirk was saying, is, I don't know, like peanut butter and jelly. One is great and they're better together.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. Great answers. And how do you know going in maybe what level of granularity you want? How do you decide on that? Is it a process you go through, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think it can vary. Sometimes I'll be working on a project and I'll start with one idea, and then 3 iterations in, it's like, oh, actually I need to change how I'm doing my data model, and that's just part of the work. And as you do it more, you get quicker at figuring out where you need to be. But my general rule guideline is whatever the lowest level people are going to want to filter down to in the viz is what you want to use as a row of data for your granularity. So, Tableau is really great at aggregating things up, but at the same time, if there's stuff that is never going to want to be broken out in a certain way, there's no sense in just multiplying your rows for no reason, because that'll definitely slow things down.
Yeah, I use this. That's a great answer. I think it sums it up. What I use these two fairy tale concepts to think about data in Tableau. One is structure your data like Rapunzel. So it's okay to have a lot of, because people for some reason think you can't have a lot of rows of data in Tableau. You can, but what happens is people don't think about the width of their data, right? So the first thing is, like, don't put columns in that people aren't going to use and analyze, especially string columns, because they take up a ton of time and they're slow to query. So think about like Rapunzel. So long's fine as long as it's narrow. And then I always say aggregate like Goldilocks. So to Jeff's point, sometimes people, they either get lazy and they don't aggregate at all, right? Or they think that Tableau is slow, so they have to pre-aggregate a lot of data, which doesn't make a lot of sense. So I say Goldilocks because you want to get, exactly like Jeff said, to the level of detail. You want to get to the level of detail that's the lowest level people will get to, right? So let's just make someone up like, we wanted to help people investing, right? To buy their own stocks. You almost certainly would want the data at the level of the close of the day, because every stock trade, what are they going to do with anyway? On the top of it being a lot of data, they're going to be writing LODs, doing complicated stuff. But if you only give them what the stock did at the end of a month, they're not going to get any sense of the variation of the stock, right? But unless they're day trading, right? And in which case, if they're a day trader, you would actually need all the trades, right? But for most people, I would say that one is an example of like end of the day is probably a pretty good idea of where to aggregate it. So.
Exactly. Otherwise, you're actually making your job as an analyst more difficult, right? And adding undue processing. And yeah, the wideness of the data is a really great point. As a consultant, you see a lot of things, and I've worked with projects where you've got a billion rows of data, and that's pretty slow depending on what you're doing. But then I've also worked with clients where it's like 500,000 rows, but 100 columns, and that's actually slower oftentimes. And so if you're not careful with the width of your data, yeah, I like that Rapunzel. I'm going to steal that, Kirk.
Yeah, take that one for sure.
Okay.
A sub one to that too is, if anyone's going to Fringe Festival next week, I'm going to talk about this one really quick. Next Friday and it's on the pivot rows to columns one, that I've seen a workbook where they had to pivot rows to columns and they tried to do it in Tableau as opposed to before Tableau, which is why that question of a great use case for Tableau prep comes in. And they had something really small, like 10 million rows. And they thought Tableau couldn't perform because that thing took 35 seconds to open. We pivoted it, and then you end up with more rows. So you end up with, say, 100 million rows, and the thing opened in less than 2 seconds, right? So if your data is not structured right, it's just not. And not to mention, you can't even do calculations on data when it looks like that, because it doesn't exist on the same row, so you can't do row level calculations. And anyway, it's kind of a subset to that one. So yeah, think narrow and just and don't worry too much about the length if it's the right level.
Awesome. Well, you mentioned a demo earlier. Kirk, do you want to do you have a demo lined up we could share for the group? I feel like that'd be
so I think it'd be fun to show some of these, and then off this data set, I think then people can maybe ask more questions. I think that it's always easier off a demo. First off, a couple of things. One, this is I recently wrote a book on data modeling in Tableau. Super quick backstory on this is I did not set out to do this. The publisher called me and I thought, you go through the why would they call me? And then I asked for 24 hours because I didn't really want to write a book. And then I was a little bit shocked that there wasn't a data modeling book with Tableau that existed. I mean, there's books on Tableau Prep, and there's a bazillion books on Tableau Desktop and how to use Tableau. not a bazillion, but quite a few. And so this book covers everything from, starting out how Tableau likes data structured, so the right format, the things we just talked about, but it goes all the way through, the parts of data management with virtual connections to when to use desktop, when to use prep, and if you're going to use ask and explain data, how you have to think about your data. It covers hopefully everything, at least at some level of detail. 250 pages or so, you just have to stop in detail, but there's a lot in it. And so we're giving away 3 of these in the Kindle version today, but you could order it online. It'll be out by, I think it's shipped. It'll be Kindle delivered on the last day of the month. And I think that's the day it ships. I don't know if you'd actually get it to your house by then, but it's definitely out of my hands at this point. But for this demo today, what I wanted to show to get to this different levels of granularity and how these questions come together is, and my apologies, the closest I could get to Madison was Chicago, but there's this site inside Airbnb where you can get data. This is a company who scrapes Airbnb data, so it's not booking data, but it's listings data and reviews data, and you can pick your lots of places in the world, and you can come in and you can download the information. So I'll spare you the whole data dictionary, but it's on here if you wanted to look. And then I thought it'd be fun to combine this with some other data, right, to show how this join and relationship works, right? So I went out and said, if you were booking an Airbnb, you might want to know what the walk score was. So I went out and got the walk score from walkscore.com. And then I thought, well, if you also wanted to know how it compared to, we won't take this last one very far, but rents in Chicago, I just did a search by neighborhood, and I just took this file, I took this, and I just put them quickly into Excel files, right? Like a copy and paste off the web, right, into Excel. So we have them. But this, I think, does a good job of showing 3 different levels of granularity, and how when you have the granularity figured out, whether you use a join or a relationship. So if we jump into Tableau with this, one of the things, and I guess it's a kind of a question, not only what level of granularity you want, but what level of granularity do you have? It's not always obvious, but Tableau does a pretty good job of making this available. So these are relatively big files. We have here the Chicago listings, and we also have reviews, right? So let's say, how could we bring both of these in, right? So, and Jeff, feel free to add anything here if I mess it up, or things to add to it. But so Chicago listings are, it's a listing, you're going to get 1 record for every listing on Airbnb in Chicago. So if you think about Tableau as a visual analytics tool first and foremost, but I think it's also inherently a really good data profiling tool, right? So if you want to know the level of granularity of your detail, Tableau always gives you at the very bottom, and we'll talk about how it does it for table or in whole model in a second, but it'll give you a count of the rows in it, right? So if I go like this, has 17 and 74 in it. So if I wanted to know the level of aggregation, now that I have that in my mind, I could have left that up. We can see all these fields we have, and one of them's ID. And if I drag ID on, you'll see that down here I have, you should see it'd be tiny, 7,414 marks. Or I could come up here at any point in time and do a count on one of these, right? And these be the same. So that's the level of granularity of our detail. So if we wanted to do a relationship or a join on this data, what we're going to want to do it at is we're going to want to do it at the level of at the level of ID, right? So ID is going to be unique. We know that we have 7,400 rows, 714 rows, we have 714 IDs. So that's about create a relationship before we this is the noodle, is this cool little orange thing, which creates a relationship between these. What's interesting about this is if I don't, if I do this and I don't do anything else, what Tableau actually does, if I come back to the sheet, is it before it even creates, we'll get back to the relationship, but you'll see that by default, we get these two tables here. And what Tableau is going to do is it's going to treat these tables independently if I only pull things in from these, right? So if I wanted to know how many reviews there are, I could double click on reviews and see that that table has got 343,394 rows. So 344,000 rows. Again, take a look to see what's unique about it. And we'll see that this also has a field in it called ID. And if we look at this ID, we're also going to get that same number of marks. Again, I could turn it into a measure. Is we have listing IDs, right? So at this point, we're kind of only profiling our data because we're too lazy to read the data dictionary, maybe, right? And if I go to listing, I've got 6,100 marks, 414 marks. So the question is, where are the other 1,300 IDs gone? So we could kind of again think about where they might go, right? So if I were to clear this sheet and I would come back to just my listings and everything I'm doing now, I'm not using the relationship between these tables at all. Right now, I'm just looking at what's in each of these tables independently, which in Tableau before we couldn't have done. We would have had to create two different data sources before relationships because we would have had to join these to look at them together. You would have been switching between data sources up here. But in any case, what we want to look at is, you'll see that we have the last review in here is a field that just sits in this table. So again, if we took last review and we brought that into our viz, and then we took ID and we turned this into a measure. So we're gonna, whoops, that was definitely not what I wanted to do. And we wanted to do a count on it. What you'll see is that if we look here, I got the zoom thing in the way. But what you'll see down here is that I've got a whole bunch under null, which is 1,312. So I think that math works out exactly that. If you took 1312 from 17, we could test it again. What would that be? From 7414 shall leave us with 6102. So the reason there's 6102 IDs in the review is because 1,312 of these things have never been booked before, right? So what we have is we've got 7,414 listings, of which 1,300 have never, I don't know, they're either not appealing to people or they didn't really open them up, or the host was only half-hearted about it, or whatever the case may be. You'll see that in Chicago as a city, by the way, just this level of analysis I think is great. Is right away Tableau is letting us know that it's like the amount of reviews that are active is pretty crazy. So of the 6,100 that ever had been booked, 5,100 have been booked this year. So you could download this data and analyze it for days. It's so much fun. So did you have any questions here first about understanding the level of detail in the data and how this works right away before we even bring the relationship together?
I think
Or Jeff,
no, this is really great. I think just for folks who are very new to relationships, basically, yeah, as Kirk was saying, you can look at one half of it or the other half, or you can combine them even in different views on the same dashboard all simultaneously. And so that's what we're doing right here.
Yeah, awesome. So that, because it creates this joins dynamic, or creates a query it needs, and the query including whether it needs to make a join. So if you'll notice, though, now that we reviewed that data, the Tableau doesn't always get the relationship right. But even though it got it wrong, it didn't impact our ability to look at the tables independently, because what we have over here on this side is we have an ID, which is the listing ID, right? Because this is the listings table. And over here, this ID is actually the review ID. So the relationship between these tables is actually a listing ID to an ID. So it also helped us understand that. Now, we'll see how Tableau now in a relationship can automatically, to Jeff's point, create the join it needs to create to do this. So if we wanted to know the number of listings per ID, we could get that, right? So remember, we got the Chicago, there's our 34,000 listings, and then that comes from one table. And then if we went up here and clicked on our ID up here, I always find it easier to read that way. What that tells us is that now it automatically created a join here. It probably did. Do we have any nulls? No. So Tableau dynamically figured out for people who are in a joins to create this query, it would have dynamically created an inner join and filtered out all those. It filtered out. Oh no, it didn't. So there'd be a bunch of zeros at the bottom. So it did, but you'll see you don't even have to worry about it. Tableau was smart enough to, and this is key, right? Because in a join, it couldn't do this. It automatically figured out that these records didn't have these IDs, the however many there was, 1312 of these listings that never had a review. It's smart enough to give them a zero, even though there's not a zero in the data, which is pretty magical, right? We could really geek out on this, like how hard that is at doing a join to figure out how you want to do that. Because had you done an inner join on this, or you done kind of a, we'll look at that in a second, but the join would have almost certainly, unless you really were good with, were really conscious of the join you were making, it would have probably eliminated that, and you wouldn't have lost those IDs, right? Which I'll show you. But it also shows us things like this particular ID has been reviewed, so it's been booked at least 2,600 times, which is kind of crazy, right? And then the second one's this. I think, if you wanted to see, you could get more information about it, which we'll get to. But this is kind of neat, because then we can answer all kinds of questions very quickly, just Tableau being Tableau, with things like, the average. So you'll see there that the average, it's not going to let me hit that average line. There's lots, yeah. So there you go. So the average of all listings is a 46 reviews. So the average listing in Chicago has had 46 reviews. So again, that's I think, for anyone who picked up Tableau after 2020.2, again, for the first time ever, might not even realize how magical it is and how difficult that was to do some of these things before, which I could show in a second. Did you want to add to that first, Jeff, or add anything?
I mean, just a personal experience when relationships came out. One of the hardest things for me was, one of the trainings I watched said, "Oh, it just works," and I'm like, "Oh, really?" And it just works, and it was really hard for me. Like, a good data analyst is very not trusting of anything, and it took a while for me to convince myself, oh no, you have to make sure it's doing the left or inner or right join that you want it to, but for the most part, it really is kind of magical. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll show this quickly. Let's say before, what we would have had to do is we would have had to do a join on this, right? So, and this is what we mean also by level of detail. Remember, this thing's got 1,714 records, and the other's got 343,000 records. If I go like this, and then I'm going to, again, I'm going to join on the field as opposed to create a relationship on the field. So this is ID and this is listing ID and this. That's good. But now if I do this, I'm forcing myself into only answering certain types of questions here. So if I do an inner join, what's going to happen is I'm going to end up with only, well, I'll show you. So if we do an inner join, well, does anyone know if I do an inner join, does anyone know how many IDs I'm going to end up with? Can we give a prize if
Go
someone
ahead and
asks?
yeah, throw it in the chat, and that automatically enters you to get the extra chances for the swag.
Yeah, if someone
And
knows now how many IDs this is going to
And
result
I would
in.
say if you're within 100, because there were two very distinct numbers you could be thinking of,
Right.
right? Yep, I see 6,100 there, which is what I would expect too. I forget the exact number.
Yeah, I think it is
Yeah.
6102, I think, is what we should see here. For some, so if I go like that, yeah, 6102. And the reason we ended up with 6102 marks is because yeah, this math is killing me, because 1312 of these IDs don't have reviews. And they don't come in because the join also works as a filter, right? So if we wanted all those, we could do a left join, right? But again, this is requiring us to think quite a bit. Now with the left join, and I go back, now we end up with 1714, because it's even bringing back the ones that don't have reviews on them, right? But I believe even if we were to now take, you'll notice now what happens down here is you'll see this, the number of the count down here is the result. There's only one. I probably should have pointed that out, but if I close these tables now, you'll notice that I don't get a count for them. I only get a count of the whole thing. And the reason for that, that we only get a count for the whole thing, we still get our 2600 there, is what happens is because it's one table now. So Tableau's treating it like one table as opposed to the two tables. And now, because of levels of aggregation, you have to get careful with a few things. Like, so before this count was the number of listing IDs. Now the count, you would think, represents reviews, which it does at the top. Because remember, if you remember, there's a lot of numbers floating around, but we had 2600 reviews. But at the bottom, remember, Tableau was smart enough to figure out all those ones that were, never had a review before, that it had 0 reviews. But now this isn't, to be fair, it's not incorrect here, but if you're not careful, it looks like these might have had a review, but they don't. They've got one record because we did a left join, and it's got no reviews, but it's still got one record. So it needs it. So it gets kind of confusing now. So again, you could create a calculation to get around this by doing, what we could do is we could do a count of the number of reviews on it, right? So again, if we went here, we did this, right? So I could do a calculated field called, this is number of reviews. But before, Tableau just knew this for us by the number of records, right? So here I would have to go the count of the number of times I see the ID, and the number of reviews is going to be the same everywhere except for these people at the bottom, right? Because if there's only one review, it also kicks off one row. But if there's no reviews, it still kicks off one row. Like, if that's confusing, it's because joins kind of are. Do you know what I mean? But the relationship's smart enough to figure that out dynamically. So hopefully that's not too heavy, depending on. Oh, go ahead, Jeff. Yeah,
oh no, I was just gonna maybe a leading question. Now, what if we were gonna try to calculate the average review? Or like, I'm not sure actually what your measures are here on the listings.
Yeah. So the average number of reviews or the review score kind of.
Or yeah, the review score. Or I'm not sure. I don't know if there is a review score, but any of your measures.
Yeah, so I picked, so Chicago listing. So I probably, are there no measures in that one? It's a good question. I think I picked the smaller of the review files because the other one's just so massive
No,
that,
yeah,
that this doesn't have like their text and what the review was. It only has that there was a review. Oh no, there's comments here.
and
Right,
I think
so
I actually said the wrong one. I meant
yeah.
one from the listings, like what's the average price or so, you know? 'cause
Oh
now
yeah, great
yeah.
question. So before, had we done this as well, let me clear the sheet. That's a great one. So if we went by their ID, so if we wanted to see the price of each one of these, what you would have to do to get this price would be where is our
I think it went below. Yeah.
yeah,
There you go.
because again, I find it easier to find these relationships too. So if I were to take price and were to put it on text like this, you'll see that clearly this listing doesn't cost $738,000 a night, but it's taking the price and it's multiplying it. I think this is where Jeff is going. It's multiplying it by each time it sees it, right? So we could get around this by going, but again, you have to trust the data. So what you'd actually have to do is you'd have to do average price. But in the case of a relationship, had I showed that, whether it's sum or average wouldn't matter because Tableau's smart enough to know that when you're asking for that measure, it's just it's what it shows on the record, not multiply it by every time it sees it.
Exactly.
So-
And then even here with average, if you were to pull ID off, you would be heavily skewed by that one with 2,600 reviews, right?
That's a great point. So if we went like this and went average price, that isn't what it actually is. If you wanted to get the average price this way without putting anything else on it, and this is for people who aren't more advanced in Tableau, I would probably have to go, I should have thought of this ahead of time. I would have to go average
Not to put you on the
price.
spot here, but yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's
And
the
then-
right calculation.
And then I would have to take the average of this, right? So I could put this on as well. And that's going to give us a huge number. But if I take the average of, I think this should give me, a different number. So the actual average price is 217, not 179, right? Is that right? Or the other way around? Average price, yeah, it's 211.70, not $179. So, and that's definitely a bit advanced, right? But if you think about the math, we have to figure out the price for every listing and then take the average of it, right? Otherwise, we're just taking the average of all those. If you think about a review as a booking for simplicity, we're taking the average of all the bookings, which isn't the same as the average of the average listing price, right? So this top one isn't a bad number. Tableau's not giving you a bad number. It just might not be giving you the number you're expecting to see, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
So
and I think that's one of, relationships. If you find yourself, like I used to use a ton of LODs and I still use LODs, but like if you're using a ton of LODs, maybe you should be using more relationships because that's definitely one of the issues it solves, that and blending.
Yes, that and blending for sure. So if we were to take reviews like this again, so back to our relationship, make sure I get this right. And now on the LOD question, price, and then we go average should be 211.17. So that's a different average than we got before, but the one we got, we needed to do an LOD to get, right? So great point, Jeff. Are there any questions before, we jump to like why, we don't want to completely diss on joins because there are cases for joins, which I thought I could build into the same data model to show why relationships can, believe it or not, can also get complicated if you have too many tables. I'm not sure what's in the chat as an example. I don't want to open it up because then I'm sharing my screen. It would put everyone on the
So
spot.
far, I'm not seeing any questions in chat, but I would encourage the group, if you have any, to go ahead and add them in and I'll ask them if I see them. for you, Kirk.
Awesome. Thanks, Olivia. So there's some other really neat things in that Airbnb data. And remember, I downloaded some data, right? So another thing we could do as an example is, and if you've never used them before, Tableau keeps getting better and better and better with spatial files. So it's not full on Esri or something yet, but it can do an awful lot of stuff, right? Here's a kind of simple one: is that it comes with a geo JSON file, that Airbnb data, which gives you Airbnb neighborhoods in a shapefile, which means you can use it for a map. So I could also take this shapefile and maybe, and what this is going to do is, it's going to let us plot it by neighborhood. So it's kind of fun. One thing, just because I did look at the data, obviously a bit, is neighborhood in the underlying data is something that hosts can type in, and neighborhood cleansed is what that group, the inside Airbnb group, does their best job to actually clean them up to real neighborhoods. So if we join neighborhood in that to neighborhood in the shapefile, what we will get is, if we want to use it, that is, again, if I collapse this table, if I click on geometry, it's going to be kind of cool for people who know Chicago. There's our Chicago neighborhoods, right? They didn't get all of them, but again, that, kind of neat, right? And then as long as we have this neighborhood on detail, what we should be able to do is do things now, like is list, say, price by neighborhood, right? So to go back to that example, so many measures in this thing. There's price. So now that we've got price on neighborhood, we can see that the most expensive neighborhood's that. Oh, again, in this case, it is going to sum up all the properties in there, because that's actually what you would probably want to see, but we can very quickly make it average. And there you can kind of quickly see visually what are the most expensive neighborhoods, and why that is. We could do all kinds of things, like say, where are the most bookings, right? So we could have taken, remember these Chicago reviews as an example, and we could put that on color. And that's probably where most of the bookings happen, because that's where most of the reviews are. So that's a count of how many reviews over time there were, right? If a review equals a booking, which it kind of does in that data set. Again, we can answer all kinds of questions on that.
And when you get to, like, even, I don't know if we need to show this, but a little more advanced, it's, I don't know if this metric means anything, but you could do a calculation where you divide the number of reviews by the average price, and Tableau will actually evaluate each half of the calculation in the right part of the relationship. And then you can use that metric. Again, that's not a very meaningful metric right now, but it's really cool that you can do that, and it just works. Right.
Like, I think the number of bedrooms is a mess calculation in this thing, if I remember correctly. Oh, right, but we have review scores here. But we could do, they'd be in the same table in that case. But yeah, we'll get to that though. Actually, we can do that in a minute, with showing where things actually get confusing and where a join might make more sense, right? So if you remember, it was a half hour or so, 20 minutes ago now, but the other two files I put in were these two Excel files, one of which was the walk scores. So we could say, as an example, we could do a calculation to go, how much does something cost relative to walk score? Like, if it's a more walkable neighborhood, do you expect prices to go up or bookings to go up by number of reviews? Would be maybe a valid one that you were getting at there, Jeff. So we can certainly bring walk scores in and do this, right? And here again, it's neighborhood cleansed on this side, and on this side, it's neighborhood. So now we have walk scores in. So if we wanted to come back here, we could also say, well, what's the most walkable neighbor? Separate from all the Airbnb stuff, we could ask ourselves the question, what's the most walkable one? And we could take walk score and put that on. And you'll see, so here sometimes things you could run into challenges with a relationship. I mean, it's not a huge deal, but what happened is the neighborhood from that table isn't on. It's a neighborhood from another table that's on. And so everything looks this like it's oh no, that's not why. I think in this case it's going to work fine. Yeah. So there's our oh, but the level of detail got us a little bit there. Did you notice I had to go to average walk score? Right. So we'll get back to the join will make that a little bit easier, but there's some other reasons we might want to do it. But there's our average walk score, right? It was multiplying the walk score by all the different locations. So we'll get back to. And then the other thing we could add, if we come back here, is we could say by we could also add rents, right? So another thing you could say is it more expensive to rent, also more expensive to get an Airbnb, right? So are they the most desirable both to rent and live in, right? These are all kind of valid questions you might ask and need these data sources for. And I could bring this one in again. So again, we could just keep going and going with these relationships, right? I could hang these relationship off these, by the way, but then it starts to get confusing quickly. Like, do I want it there or do I want it there? Right? Requires a little bit of thought, which we can get back to. But again, I want neighborhood cleansed, and over here I want neighborhoods. The only two I can. And now, we could ask the question, rents, where's the average rent the highest? Again, I think we're going to run into the same thing with some, and then we're going to have to come here and average it. And that's the most expensive neighborhood, right? So this is kind of fine, but from a relationship standpoint, it more or less works. But our data models gets a little bit complex for one thing. And then another thing we get is we're going to end up with a lot of neighborhoods, right? Because we've got neighborhood in each one of these tables. And it's like, which neighborhood do I want in my view? They all have different names because they can't have the same name in Tableau. Another trick question you might see in a Kahoot: can you ever use the same name? You can between a field and a parameter, but not between two fields. So what might make this easier, we get more into the interest of time, but what I would do if I were doing this data model is because these three, a couple of problems with these. If we got more into the data, the nature of neighborhoods is a little bit messy, because not everyone has the same definition or level of granularity of neighborhood. Like, at least to the best of my knowledge, neighborhoods are, I don't know, they're not random, but they're not official usually, right? So if I got into this, again, I don't want to spend too much time, I'm not looking at time, but they all have different numbers of neighborhoods in them, right? And there's nothing we can do about that, because we can't clean up walk scores and we can't disaggregate them. Right. So what I would probably do here to make the model simpler and to intentionally force the join to eliminate neighborhoods that I couldn't map, right? Because we're going to want to use them on a map, is what I would do here is I would open this up if it was me, and I would go, the next most important thing to me is walk scores. So I would go like this, and I would intentionally go, so I take my neighborhood from here, and I take my neighborhood from here, and I would do a left join on this. And why I'm doing this on purpose is I'm saying I want to see the neighborhood on the map, which is this is the one with the geometry file, regardless of whether it's in the walk score. But I don't want to see the neighborhood from walk scores if I can't map it anyway, if that makes any sense. And I would continue that thinking with rents, to say if walk score is more important than rent to me, I would repeat that and say, so now the neighborhood in the rent file has to be in both the walk scores and this one, or I'm not going to display it, because it's just going to get confusing, because there's nowhere to put it on the map, right? Tableau got that join clause right. The other thing it allows us to do, and then I promise to be done, is it super cleans up our model, right? So now we have, did I eliminate two? Oh, because I'm a neighborhood. So now we only have three. So now it only shows up as three tables, which is, I think, is a good thing. You're also not asking Tableau to to jump all over the place with queries, because these are always at the same level of detail, and there's only one row per neighborhood. So if I'd showed that, there's like, I think there's in the area of only 75 rows when you do this. And the other advantage I can do is now I can come here and I can hide these other neighborhood fields, because that one's on the viz. Whoops, that one's on a viz somewhere, so I can't hide it. Let me take this one off, and I'm going to put this one on, and then I'm going to hide this one just because it had the better name. And now I have less neighborhood fields to get confused about. And my query is going to, so I only have to worry about which one of these I put on the view, because you'll see it has to be on the detail in order for the calculation to work. And now it's a lot easier, I think, at least in this case. So the relationships worked, but this is a lot cleaner model. It's going to eliminate the number of queries. We knew that was at the right level of detail, and we can still do these kind of fun things like, rent to price ratio, to Jeff's point. And then what we could do is, was it called rent? Average rent divided by, by price, and then rent to price, right? Rent to price ratio. We have this new calculated field, and we can put it on color, and we could be like,
That's probably, some, but yeah.
Yeah, is that right? Yeah, so
that's better.
Yeah, so you'll see that for whatever reason in that neighborhood, and some people might know Chicago more than me, is like, we could normalize that and get even further, but you get an idea that for whatever reason, no one wants to Airbnb here, but the rent's really high, is what's that saying, I think, right? Is that
And something interesting to note at this point, like if you expand the Chicago listing folder on the tables side, somewhere in there, we've got a calculation, right? Yeah, right there.
Yeah,
But that calculation is only using things from that logical table, so it's in that folder. Whereas if you scroll to the bottom, you see our new calculation is out loose, which tells you it's doing a couple of things, which, yeah, it's just interesting. And also just, I did want to loop back to the data source tab real quick.
one quick thing.
Yeah, go ahead.
I don't know if people know this, but you can also do that in Tableau. If you go C:, you only see your calculated fields. Go for it.
So yeah, I think linking what you were saying back to what we were saying about granularity earlier, the key being you need to be able to do what you need to do, but simplicity is preferred. And so, all the three tables we joined in the neighborhoods logical table there are all at the same level of granularity. Each row means the same thing, whereas each of these other ones is a totally different grain. And so generally, I'd say anything that's at the same granularity should be joined inside of a logical table, one of these rectangles, and then relationship to other stuff as a guideline.
That sums it up perfectly, I think. And again, roughly, it's 7,400 rows, 343,000 rows, 75 rows.
Yep.
Yeah. So I pass it back over to questions. Sorry if I got too carried away there, but I think there's like a lot of concepts in that hopefully people got or could ask questions off of.
And as just, if you have a question, probably other people have the same question. So there's definitely a wide range of experience on this group. So, please ask away.
There might still be GIFs out there available too.
I mean, I believe that they will take people who commented in the chat and randomly pick people to get a couple copies of the ebook and Tableau store swag. So seems like a pretty good deal. Or you're muted there.
Thinking
Olivia.
of a best value listing calculation, but so what's the best walkability score, review rating for like the best price might be a good.
Yeah,
sure.
the challenge with these is I could geek out forever on it, right? Like, would we want because we'd probably actually, it was my bad, we'd probably want to aggregate those first is what we actually want to do. So yeah, if we go price to walkability, we would probably want to take and it would be at the level of neighborhood when we pull it on, right? So we probably want to take the average price in the neighborhood is where we're going to apply it versus its average walk score. Is that right? Some things we do a lot on the fly here that we'll see, but if we put that on, so price to walkability, we would, yeah, I'd have to think about that. Did I get that right? Or you get the idea. There's a lot of fun analysis we could do in that for sure.
Yep.
We could.
And yeah, something I referenced before is, you know, the neat thing about this is you can do, if you have a dashboard with, you know, 3 vises on it, you could have one that's looking at listings only, one that's looking at reviews, one that's looking at neighborhoods, and you could have a shared filter by neighborhood. And even if though it's just using one of the tables, as long as you set up your relationships right, you know, it would apply across the board and you wouldn't have to muck around with, you know, blending or related data sources because it's all one data source. And like actions work really well, even across the different related logical tables there. And yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, yeah, because yeah, you've been showing you can dynamically do like left, outer, right, inner, joins, or like just pick one of them, but you can actually use it multiple ways on a single dashboard, which I think is pretty amazing.
Yeah, because this is doing a join. We'd have to think about now. We put so many calculations on it, right? And then
Yep.
if we just wanted to do this by price, that's a single table, right? So there's no join, and so it'd be super snappy, right? And then if we wanted to go, yeah, the listing ID, number of reviews, that doesn't need a join, right? And then anyway, so to Jeff's point, if we put all these on the dashboard, it would be a pretty ugly dashboard, but they would be one table query, one with a join, and then it could definitely be different types of joins depending on the questions we were asking. We have some things in the chat, I think. I don't know if they're questions.
We've been having some chat activity, but we are not getting any direct questions. I'm shocked. I did not know about the calculation trick in there either. I mean, everything you've shown today is like blown my mind a little bit. I've never been super familiar with the relationships piece. I'm old school join girl, so this has been really helpful for me. But also that calculation tip is life-changing.
Oh, just this one? Isn't it amazing?
Yeah, the C colon. I had no clue. No clue.
That's
like
awesome.
the things I learn on these meetings is mind-boggling to me.
And it's kind of neat how, to Jeff's point too, that like whether on a relationship, if it needs to cross tables, it falls on the bottom. So it's just, I mean, right away, that's kind of neat to know that, hey, it needs to do a join to do that. Doesn't need a join to do that.
Yeah. We did get a question in chat. Are there any other shortcuts that you all would like to share with the group on that you like and using when you're working with these data models?
Data modeling, speed tipping. Let's see.
Yeah.
We're springing it on you too. So what comes to mind?
Something that I've become a big proponent of that is related to this, but only a little bit, is I used to work at a place that everything was run on custom SQL. And a couple people like joined things together with the actual tables in Tableau. And I feel like that's even worse. But like now, what I've settled on very firmly is if you can, getting views into the data warehouse and then using that and just that, and you can relationship them together or like join them if you have to, if they're in different databases. But like then instead of, you know, when your one column changes its definition, instead of having to download 10 data sources and re-extract each of them for 2 hours and republish it or muck around with the API or whatever, you just update the view in SQL.
100%. I just talked super quick in the book about it, but people also, I don't think, know that when you do custom SQL in Tableau, Tableau always runs that as a subquery, effectively materializes it in memory, and then still creates the query it wants to create around it. Like, so by definition, custom SQL will always be slow. Like it could be equally fast, but it can never be faster.
Yeah, it does it as, whatever your query is. It says select star from parentheses your query. And it's just unnecessary, but sometimes necessary.
So if you want we didn't even get into Tableau prep today. Another cool tip, or like advanced kind of tip, which is leans into what Jeff was saying is what's neat about Tableau Prep is you can connect to published data sources. And you can't, you can obviously connect to a published data source in Tableau Desktop, but if you do, you can't join it or create a relationship to it. If you are lucky enough to be able to write back to, say, you're using Snowflake or something, and you can write back to a Snowflake table. If you want kind of a thing that seems advanced that's not, if there's something that Tableau Prep can do that you can't do in Tableau Desktop, and you don't actually want to write the SQL to do or don't have the skills to do, you can output your Tableau Prep flows to database tables and then turn around, if it's a thing that only Tableau Desktop does, and then connect to those tables that you modeled in Tableau Prep.
And that is why you make friends with your DBAs.
Yeah.
That is why your DBAs get the cookies at Christmas.
Right.
We have a couple of questions that came into chat. We're encouraging this conversation now. So one of the questions that came in, are you suggesting to replace custom SQL and Tableau with a connection to a view in the SQL database?
Yes.
Okay.
I think for like development purposes, when I'm still not sure what the query is going to be, to avoid bothering DBAs unnecessarily, I will do custom SQL until it's like production ready, at which point I switch it to a view. I don't know, Kirk, if you want to weigh in on that.
Yeah, 100%. I was talking to one of one of the clients of our company, and exactly that scenario. But what he never realized was, so the reason I said to him, I go, why are you using custom SQL at all? And he goes, because the table name, the field names change all the time in the database, which would be another issue, but it's control. And it's a pain in the butt in Tableau because you're replacing field references all the time. And he goes, that drives me crazy. I'm like, and he goes, I can just change it. I can just cast it really quickly in the SQL, right? And I went, yeah, we'll just make a view. He goes, holy crap. And it was so much faster, right? So he still had a case for custom SQL, kind of, right? I mean, there's another whole question of the DBAs about why you're changing field names all the time, but it is what it is, right? So I 100% agree with you.
But the data management liaison in me says that is a process that can be improved.
Correct.
Yeah.
Quickly,
yeah, if you're not checking with your users, you stop and revisit that.
Yeah.
Another good, I was just gonna say another good prototype. I don't know if there's one in here, but is like host name in here. I can't remember. A thing I would only ever prototype in Tableau, right, would be, well, this is a mess. But if it was a clear first name, last name, you might want to come in here in Tableau and do a split or something, right? I would, again, this data is so bad, but if it was first name, last name, I would prototype with these splits, and I do string calculation, right, left, all that stuff all the time. But I would never take it to production. I would turn around and do that in Tableau Prep, because I wouldn't want to pay the price of that query every time.
Yeah,
but I would prototype it here first, probably.
Or if you're, again, depending on your organization and how this works, either prep or, if you get that in your query, but I think the eventual goal, if you can, would be to push that into your data warehouse layer so that people outside of the Tableau ecosystem can use the same number and the same whatever calculation you're doing. And everyone, I feel like, has the problem where there are competing sources of truth. And so if we do a bunch of cool stuff in Tableau, but it's not available to people using whatever else people are using, that can be problematic.
Yep. I agree. I'm just in the situation where you can't. The way I talk about it all the time is just the cost of a query. So the cost of the query is the same to Tableau Prep as it is to Tableau Desktop. The difference is that Tableau Prep only has to run it, as an example, once a day, versus Tableau Desktop might be running it every single time you come to a view. But if you can, get it as far back, get everything good as far back in the pipeline as you can.
And that's a good, do you put the calculation in Tableau or in the SQL, or Prep is obviously a great choice also. And, if it's something like where we're doing these average aggregations on the fly, depending on what you're doing in Tableau, you definitely need that in Tableau. But otherwise, take that off stream, right? Get it farther up the stream. Yep.
So we do have another visualization stylistic question about They have a nested table visualization and they can't get the text to rotate to horizontal no matter what they try. They know they can create a calculated field to get around the issue, but but only in a table that doesn't have nested labels. Do you all have any advice on how they can get those labels to horizontal?
Yeah, I mean, I think at a certain point, we may need, we can share ways to rotate things. I'm not sure what everything they can think of is so far, but yeah, if you pull that out, you can even.
Yeah, we Googled it for a few hours until we all gave up. There were three of us working on it at the same time. And it took us hours before we just said the heck with it.
Sure. And so are they on rows or columns?
They are in the labels are in the
Yeah.
rows and they're
Okay.
nested rows.
Okay, like this?
Yeah, except they're nested.
Cool.
So like it would have it would have a split after that first column.
More like that.
Yeah, kind of. So like it's like we've got one row that's split into yes, no, and the yeses are on one row and the no's are in the next row down, but they're nested under a single, the first column A. And then the results, of course, go to the columns that to the right of it. And
So,
for whatever reason, all of the nested labels were rotated vertically. And we didn't set it up that way, but it's just the way that Tableau wanted it to be. And so we made the rows bigger and wider, and we honestly played with it for so long. We just didn't know what to do.
have you done this formatting menu?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
And
None of that
there's
worked.
also, if you right click on the pills on rows, I think I saw it in there somewhere. I always have to find it. Or yeah, the arrow.
Mhm.
There's
Yep.
the rotate.
We
Where was
tried that. Yeah.
Saw that
we tried-
too.
Yep. And then that's when we went out to Google because we tried all the normal formatting tricks. And then that's where we came across the calculated field trick, which we then proceeded to use, but it only worked when we didn't have the table nested. So it was just bizarre.
That is. I will say, yeah, that could be something.
Yeah.
That's a good one. And I don't know, I've definitely inherited workbooks that for just some completely unknown reason are making all the text purple, and it's like, what the heck is going on here? Sometimes I just, start over. You don't want to throw away everything, but if you like pull in the data again and keep your calculations,
We
it's
actually
always
tried blowing up the table and rebuilding it, and that didn't work either.
fair enough.
So I don't know what's going on, but oh man, we just published it as is, even though it's annoying because it had the information in it that our customers
Jenna, have
needed.
you tried posting it on the forum to see if anybody has some answers there for
We
you?
cannot because there's pH. It's healthcare data.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you're not able to reproduce it in other
If you,
places. Yeah,
We
go
could
tell you-
try putting some dummy data together and put it in a forum somewhere.
Yeah,
Are
we've
you-
scrambled ours at DHS a lot because we can't post our workbooks either. So sometimes we
Yeah.
just pull the set out and then scramble everything and throw it back up on the forum.
That's an
Do
idea.
you use Twitter?
I don't.
If you know someone who uses Twitter, hit up Luke Stanke with it. Stanke. It's
Staenke.
Sorry,
Okay.
Stanke. Like Luke
Oh.
is obsessed with making Tableau do the best tables in the world. But
Oh.
if anyone could answer that question, and he is a Tableau visionary.
Okay.
I don't know
Tableau
anyone who's
forum
more
is also great. Yeah. But
yeah.
yeah.
I just don't know
also
anyone who's
Luke,
more
yeah.
obsessed with trying to.
We need someone who's obsessed to solve this because I thought I was obsessed and I even reached my limit. I just said the heck with it.
I'm not sure this exact one, but he's obsessed with making tables work. So
Okay. Thank you.
So we have one final question in the chat for you, and then we'll switch over to our wrap up and giveaways at the end of the meeting. We're so grateful for all the time that you've spent. I'm going to try and read this question to you, but you might need to take a look at chat because it is a long one. So
Okay.
the question is, how would a relationship work with two tables that are not directly related in the data pane, but have a common intermediate table that they are both related to? For example, relationship exists between table A, table B, and table C. However, you want a field in table A and a metric in table C for a viz. Will the relationship work as intended, or will the data source get confused?
I think, I think I don't know if I've so Kirk, I'm reading it, I don't know if you've read it,
Yeah,
but
I read
basically
it
having
too.
like an intermediate table. I think at a certain point, there's different ways to model it in the relationships. In that case, I might be tempted to put table B, the intermediate table, as the root table and have other things relationship to it. If that's kind of your common source of sanity. But I think either way it would work. I'm still thinking about if you use like a category in one and a metric from another. Again, I'm not trusting as an analyst, but I feel like it would just work.
Yeah.
But I don't know, Kirk, if you have any specific experience on that. I've definitely used metrics and like done complex calculations across intermediate relationship tables, and it worked.
Yeah, I find it would also be a good form question, or, depending on whether you can mock up data, because it's a little hard generically to answer the question. I was just going to try to do it, but I don't have a good example, I don't think. Would it?
So like here, I'm trying to think of an example.
Yeah, so am I.
Logically. So, okay, if we're sticking with Airbnb, you like say walk score was based on zip code, and rents were based on neighborhood. Could you do? I think you just have to be careful about the question you're asking, because then if you said, what's the average rent per zip code, it's not actually the average rent per zip code. It's the average rent of places in the Airbnb data that are in that zip code.
Right, it's the zip code cross neighborhoods. That's a really
Right.
tricky one, because you'd have to use an intersex calculation in the first place. But yeah, but I know what you mean generically. Yeah, it's hard to answer the question without knowing the exact specifics. Like if it's 1-to-1 across them, it would work, I guess. But it needed the intermediate table to hit the 1-to-1 condition. It should work, but otherwise it might not.
And I think to echo something you said, Kirk, I think it would work and it would give you a good number, but it might not be the number you expect.
Yeah, right. That's a good way to put it.
Whatever you're telling Tableau to do, it'll be computationally correct. It's just, it might not be a human sensical metric. Yeah.
Thank you both so much. We really appreciate your time today. This was super insightful for me. I might actually start using relationships now.
Should.
Keep our fingers crossed. It turns out that it might be a lot easier than what I've been doing for a long time. So thank you again for all of this information. And I do want to go ahead and switch over because we have some giveaways for today. So giveaway winners. Jen, do you have our winners for us?
I do. So people who participated in the chat got an extra entry. Everybody who was here today got an entry. And our winner of Kahoot got an extra entry. And then I did a random drawing. And we have 3 winners who will be receiving the Kindle version of Kirk's book. That is Han Zhang, Kay Howell, and Devin Wixon. If any of those people are not currently here, we'll follow up with them by email. If you are here, congratulations. And then we also have 2 winners of Tableau gift store swag. You'll get a $25 gift certificate. That'd be Christy Borkwin and Lori Kaiser.
Yay, congratulations to everybody who won. Thank you all for your participation, and a special thank you to Jen for going through all of that work and finding our winners for today's meeting. We really appreciate your help. So we will be in contact with the winners to coordinate your gifts, so keep a lookout. We are also going to be sending out the recording from today's meeting for everybody to be able to come back to this conversation and think through relationships and joins for your own data and how you can improve your data modeling for your visualizations. We do have a couple of upcoming events, even though we're at the end of the year. The Analytics Virtual Tug is on December 15th. We are tentatively, location to be announced, planning a happy hour for the Madison Tableau user group in person on February 22nd. So mark that down on your calendars. And then March 22nd will be our first Q1 meeting for this Tableau user group. So it is the end of the year, but keep an eye on the user groups. Remember, most of them are virtual and open for you to attend. And we strongly encourage you to network again with us together in February and March after the new year, but also to encourage you to attend other user groups. We really appreciate everybody's participation today. So a huge thank you from the Madison Tug leadership team. Make sure to reach out to us if you would like to be a speaker at a future event. We accept speakers at all levels because everybody is at a different level, and we really want to encourage the content to be relevant to you and your needs with data and Tableau. And so there are a bunch of ways for you to stay connected. These slides will be sent out after the show, or after the show. Whew, after the user group meeting later this week. So please let us know and reach out to us. We encourage you to communicate with us on Slack or reach out to us directly on Twitter as well. So please, I hope everybody has a lovely holiday season. And with that, we will end our user group meeting today. Thank you again to our presenters. A special thanks to Jeff and Kirk. It was really just absolutely great to have you here today, and we hope to have you back in the future. And Kirk, I can't wait to read your book.
Oh, thank you.